Hey, hi everyone. This is V again. I'm sorry about the delay. My Wi-Fi cut out unexpectedly and it took me a little while to get back in here. But I would like to cover how to ask for letters of rec because eventually people watch the recording. So even if you dipped out from our live stream, hopefully people, hi Deva, you're back, you're still here. Hopefully people will be able to watch the recording and it might be helpful. And for those who ask questions, hopefully those questions would be helpful for you too. So I'm gonna jump right into the presentation about how to ask for letters of recommendation. And for those of you who are applying to graduate school, this is something you should be on your mind because letters of rec are usually a part of every application. So I'm going to just pull up my presentation right here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Oh, let me just actually play it. There we go. There we go. All right, so how to ask for letters of rec. So before we proceed, what are letters of recommendation? They're essentially a letter that either a professor or an employer, someone you have worked with, can write on your behalf. So they will be able to speak about what it's like to work with you, what your interests are, things that you all have worked on collectively, things like that. And that helps a review committee for graduate admissions make a decision about you based on what other people have to say, because references can go a really long way. So usually applications ask for at least 2, sometimes more than that, sometimes up to 5. But usually 2 to 3 is the average. And most PhD applications are going to ask for those letters from previous professors. So some of them will accept them from employers, but some of them will strictly say, we're just looking for professors. I'm going to stop my camera here. Okay, just so that it doesn't use my Wi-Fi. Okay, but most MAs will accept letters from previous employers and professors. And so if you're uncertain about that, about what they're looking for and what they'll accept, I highly recommend you reach out to the program directly. If the website is vague, if you just want to clarify, if you're struggling to get letters from professors, what have you, just go ahead and reach out to them and let them know. All right. So how to get strong letters of recommendation. What are the steps? How does this work? So the first step is making connections. Making strong connections with your professors while in undergrad is the best strategy for strong letters in the future. That means going to their office hours, and they might have other terms for that at different universities, but essentially dropping in when professors are available to talk about your grade, to talk about the assignment, and introduce yourself and make a strong connection if you can. Let them know your interest in the course, in the research, in the material, and let them know your interest in applying to graduate school too. And make those strong connections with employers as well, and never leave on a bad note. And even if you don't leave on a bad note, do your best to leave on a good note. And just let people know, I appreciate the opportunity, and would you consider writing a letter of recommendation in the future? Even if you don't know exactly where or when you're applying, it's still good practice so that people, they can let you know right while you're still in their vicinity and they have been engaging with you. They can let you know, like, yeah, I would be happy to write you a letter. Let me know in the future. And so then you already have a yes, you already have a confirmation. So I do recommend asking professors or employers in person if they would consider writing you a letter and if they think it could be a strong one. It's not uncommon to ask if a professor could write you a strong letter. In fact, I recommend always asking if they can write a strong one because it's not really about the amount of letters you have, it's about the quality of them. So ask if they can write a strong one, and then the professor or employer can kind of reflect reflect on that they've had on with you to determine if they can actually write a letter that has enough content to be considered a strong one. So I recommend going ahead and asking this as you're finishing the class. It doesn't hurt. You can either ask in person, at the end of the class, at the end of the last lecture. You can stick around and ask to speak with them. After receiving your grade, you can send a thank you email and ask to meet, and you might meet them during their office hours next quarter. Or, after an internship or when you're switching employers is a good time to send a thank you, say thank you in person, and then ask if they would consider writing you a letter in the future. That's usually what I do. I try to do it and it's just more memorable. So once you have a confirmed letter writer and they've confirmed that they're able and willing to write you a strong letter, it's really your job to secure the letter by the date. And what I mean by that is that it's your job to follow up. It's your job to provide all of the information that's necessary for them to submit and to do it as, in the most accessible form as possible. I do want to say that there will be some letter writers who confirm and say that they can write you a letter and who simply won't have time in the end. This does happen. This has happened to me. It's okay. Professors are really busy and they probably get a lot of requests. So always ask for more letters than you need. Let's say you need 3, go ahead and ask 4 people if you can. And it doesn't hurt. It really wouldn't hurt for you to submit 4. If anything, 1 would just not make it or be reviewed. But it is your job to provide all of the information that they will need and make it very easy. So what I mean by that is once you follow up after someone has confirmed that they can write you a letter, send a friendly and formal email thanking them and then confirming, like, thank you for, your willingness to write a letter for me. I really appreciate it for these applications, and list them. Make sure to make all of the information accessible. So that is the date of submission, that's where to submit, how to submit, what the contents of the letter can be. So you might email them your SOP, that's your statement of purpose, or your personal statement, or your CV. And the reason of doing this is so that they can reference it in order to write a letter. So they might know you as a student and they might, remember what it's like to have you in their class. But if you send them the SOP, now they have an idea of what you plan to do in graduate school, and that can help them write a letter towards that. So you want to make it as cohesive as possible. And you might submit the SOP to them. You might type up a few paragraphs that kind of summarize SOP and make it accessible to them. Whatever you think is best, based on the relationship you have with that professor and based on the application. And lastly, gentle reminders and follow-ups. It is common, and in fact, I do recommend to send a friendly reminder the week of the submission date. Go ahead and send an email saying, thank you once again, I really appreciate it. And this is just a friendly reminder that that letter is due on this date at this time. And make sure to use the appropriate time frame as far as time zone. So if this letter submission is Eastern Standard Time, but you and the professor you're working with are on Pacific Standard Time, please make sure to just, give them the appropriate time, because errors can occur. And if someone's off by an hour or 2, it could be too late. Always include the link again, the date and the time. So basically, essentially what you've sent in the first email with all of the information, aside from the SOP, aside from what the contents should be, this follow-up is just, you could send the SOP again. That's not going to hurt. But this email is just to follow up and give them, make it as easy as possible for them to submit by providing that link again or sending that link from inside the application That's actually how my applications were. Within the application, you send an email. So it goes directly from the application, from the university you're applying to the professor, and that is how they submit. So go ahead and do that whole process once again, just so that it's accessible to them. They don't have to dig through their email box. They don't have to, struggle or be flustered to find it. It's right there. And that increases your chances that they'll be able to submit it on time. At the end of the day, this kind of is just like a race against the clock, if you will. Professors are really busy, deadlines are approaching, things are due every single week for professors usually, or something of the sort. So you just want to make sure that you are reminding them when necessary, you're being friendly, providing all the information they need, making it available to them. Now, I always recommend to follow up with a warm and friendly thank you. This never goes out of style. And I actually think it's a really important part of requesting letters. Even a physical thank you card is a kind gesture that professors appreciate. But, just an email will suffice. Make sure to say thank you. Make sure to, reference the impact that this makes and how appreciative you are, because you want to maintain strong relationships with anyone and everyone who's written you a letter, because one, they could write for you again, and two, they might have, future opportunities that might benefit you, and also because they were kind enough to write you a letter, and that's a very kind gesture. Now, a couple other things. It can be hard to ask for letters of recommendation. I know I hesitated with it, and I used to feel very uncertain about it. But truth be told, a lot of professors consider this a part of their job. In fact, kind of most professors do. They understand that this is a part of being a good professor, of being an influential and supportive faculty member within a department, is to write for students and to support them in getting into graduate school. So most of them are really willing to write for you and able to, so long as you provide the information that they need, and that you do it in a way that is, respectful of their time. So you wouldn't ask for these letters just a few weeks before. I'd highly recommend asking at least 2 months before. That is so that you can wait for their response, give them the content and the information, examples that they need, like your SOP, your personal statement, or CV. They might follow up with further questions. They might want to speak to you in person or over the phone. And then, of course, the actual drafting and submission of that letter. It takes time, and it's just important to give professors enough time and also give yourself enough time when applying to graduate school. Things take a little longer than we expect sometimes. Okay. So here's our QR code. If you'd like to scan, check out our website and see our offerings. We truly believe that if you desire to be in graduate school, then you absolutely belong in graduate school. And that's why we're here to support you, whether it be through the exams that you might be taking, or providing a friendly student community through Discord, which you can also find through our QR code, so you can speak to other folks who are also applying. And then, of course, we have admissions experts like myself who can support you with your essays and actually give you feedback, line by line feedback, and comments on your essays before you submit them. So that's all for now as far as letters of recommendation. I know that we don't have a lot of people on the live broadcast anymore because the first one, my Wi-Fi cut out, so I think we lost some viewers. But if anyone is tuning in and has some questions, I'm happy to answer. I'll stick around for that. Letters of recommendation, they can be challenging for sure, but they're an important component of applying. And I think that as long as you are able to send out that information in a timely manner, and you ask friendly, in a friendly way, of course, like with an understanding of how busy professors are, I think it's very likely that you can get some strong letters. And actually, funny enough, is some professors might even ask you to write the letter for them or write a few paragraphs for them. This isn't uncommon. In fact, if someone asks you to do so, I would completely take advantage of the opportunity, because now you're able to insert the language, the terminology, you're able to reference your work and your research in the way that you would. And that's probably as close as you can get to accuracy. And then that professor can go in and make any changes if needed. And they can add, their own spin, but at least they have um, basically your words as the foundation. That's not uncommon. A lot of professors will ask you to do that. And I encourage it. Okay, David, let's see. Can I send LOR from professors I worked under for my final year dissertation project? I worked on a research project in another institute. Absolutely. That would actually probably be a great letter of recommendation, because these professors have worked with you directly. Yeah. Oh, you already did your dissertation directly in that type of research. And so if you're applying to PhDs, another PhD, that would look great. If you're applying to a different type of technical degree, I still think it can be useful. Really, all it comes down to is what that program requires, what their requirements are as far as who they want to hear from. And as long as they say professors are good, then I think that someone that you worked with on an actual project would be a great letter. And then just follow through with the tips I recommended as far as sending them the information they need, things to reference, whether that's your CV, your personal statement. That's a good thing to send to them so that they have an idea of where you're applying and what it is that you're focusing on now, especially if your research has changed since your dissertation, which is common, of course, it's completely normal. But you need to update them on that. It's You can't expect them to know that. And also it really helps the application to have some cohesiveness between what you're saying in your statement of purpose or your personal statement and what your letter writers are saying about you too. If you are all kind of talking about the same research that you're working towards and referencing it with similar terminology and your research plan and things like that, it looks pretty strong. So definitely just make sure to send them that information so that they know how to best support you and how to have a strong letter for you. And if you're watching, but you have questions not relevant to letters of recommendation, that's completely fine. You can ask any questions about applying to graduate school. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Davis says, I am applying for a master's again, but in a different specialization. Cool. I'm planning to ask 2 professors for my dissertation project and 1 for my university. We'll ask more. Oh, yes. Yes, I do recommend asking more just in case one doesn't follow through, which happens. Okay, so applying for a different master's, congratulations, in a different specialization. So yeah, so if you are going into a different program, different from your previous research, I think that's kind of like, that's when it's crucial to update these professors who are writing for you about what you're doing now, so that they can kind of connect the dots and they can say, I've worked with Dava in this capacity in this type of research, and these are her strengths, and this is what I appreciated about her contributions, and I can see how that can transfer over into this or that. So make sure that your letter writers are aware of the changes you're making, research-wise, career-wise, and things like that, so that those letters are up to date and the committee can see that they're up to date. The review committee, that is, when you're applying. So I hope that's helpful, Dava. And I like to apply for a master's program. In my undergrad, I didn't have any research project work. Can I get LORs from undergrad course instructors? Yeah, so just know that it's common for folks to not have any research experience in their undergrad. It happens. I mean, it's not an uncommon experience at all. And essentially, if you're applying for a PhD, you're applying for a master's. But essentially, if you're applying for the master's, like that's where you're getting that training anyways. So it's completely fine. But yes, I would reach out. So in this case, if you don't have like a very memorable experience with professors, but nonetheless you took their classes, you got strong marks and things like that, you can still ask for letters of rec. Essentially, what I recommend doing in this situation is to reach out to those professors and to remind them, which class you took, the grade that you got, something about the course that was impactful for you, that you're still interested in as far as graduate school, something like that, so that it can kind of jog their memory and like, oh, I do remember you. You did get this grade. That was the quarter that we did this or that, so that they can have some content to write about, so that they can say, oh yeah, I do remember the student, and in this quarter they did this, and they're, whatever it is they have to say about that. So provide that information there. And I've asked for letters of rec for fellowships and actually graduate school from professors that I did not have direct research experience with. So I simply took their class, got a good grade, met with the professor in their office hours, had good conversations and things like that, but didn't necessarily work on any research with them. Nonetheless, they're still able to write a strong letter if if you did well in their class. So don't hesitate to ask if that's the situation. Just provide that information for them. Your name, of course, the class you took with them, what quarter and year, and something about that class that demonstrates that you remember and that it was impactful for you in some way. Yeah, there's something else I was going to say about letters of recommendation. It's not coming to me now, but I was talking to some of my colleagues about that. As far as the strength of a letter versus kind of having a professor who's a name dropper in the sense that they're well known in the industry, in their field, and really the content of the letter is the most important thing, I would say. I think that's up to debate, but the content of that letter is really important. So if you're in a position now where you can make those connections with professors or employers, take full advantage of it. Shake people's hands, introduce yourself, ask the questions, show up to the office hours, show up to the social event if your class or program has them, and meet people. And it can be daunting and it can be a little nerve-wracking. It has been for me, but that's how you meet people, and you'd be surprised to see how much professors want to support you, especially as you're pursuing graduate school. And making those connections goes a really long way. In fact, I'm still working with professors today who I met in undergrad, and they're at different institutions now, and I'm at a different institution now, and nonetheless, like, that connection still pays off. And honestly, graduate school is really just about the people you meet, the connections you make, the impact you make, the impact people make on you. It's really just getting to know people and sharing your ideas and things like that. Let me show this question real quick. Okay. Except from professors of undergrad, who else can I get LORs for applying to masters? So that depends on the program. If the program says that they will only accept professors, then you're kind of limited to that. If they're open to previous employers, then then you can talk to anyone that you've worked with in any capacity, whether that's an internship or, you know, a job that you've had, things like that. So it depends on the program. I will say that, like, thinking about professors you've had and professors that you've worked with in undergrad can feel like a really limiting pool. But I think if you were to look into your transcripts and kind of remember all of those professors, because we take a lot of classes in undergrad, like a lot, like 3 to 5 a quarter, right? And if you were to kind of dig through, you might find professors that you kind of forgot about, like you're not really thinking about right now, but it's worth reaching out to them. The worst thing they can say is no, or they could just not respond. But I would recommend just kind of like poking through, and there might be a professor that you're like, oh yeah, I remember that summer quarter and I did really good. And like, you know, we connected. I went to their office hours a few times and like whatever, and just like reach out again, even if it's been a couple years, you know, and again, jog their memory by introducing yourself, the class you took, the year and the quarter or semester, and like what you did in the class. Because there might be more professors out there than you think that are willing to write for you. That's my biggest recommendation of that. If you feel like, oh, I don't really have any, is like, you might have some that you're just not really thinking about, or that you're hesitating to reach out to because you're shy or you think they'll reject you. But if they reject you, like, okay, oh well, like now you know, but they could say yes. They could say yes. And it's always worth like following up with a professor, you know, letting them know what you're doing now, letting them know how the class has impacted you today. Even if it's a couple years later, it doesn't matter. You could have continued to read in that, you know, field. You could have, that could have exposed you to something else. You could have met folks in that class who you're still, you know, working with, things like that. If you can demonstrate that that class was impactful to you, I really think it increases the likelihood of a professor wanting to write for you. That's from my experience. All right, we got another question. Oh, okay. Okay. Hi, I want to apply for Ivy League schools for PhD, and I don't know from where to start. Can you guide me? I have a bachelor's degree in computer science, but no research experience. Also, I'm an international student. Okay. Thank you for asking this question. It's a big one. But essentially, applying for the PhD in Ivy League schools, you're going to need to know the program that you're interested in, and what about that program, you know, makes you want to go to school there. Like, what does that program offer you that other programs and other schools don't? Because in graduate school, it's not so much about the university. I mean, it is, but it's not as much about that as it is about the program and the faculty in that program. So start looking for which programs you're interested in and why. And it's great that you know that you want to be in the Ivy Leagues for whatever reason, but it's important that you know which program and why and how they compare. And the reason why I say that's the first place to start is because that's going to be the bulk of your essay. You're going to be writing to this committee, basically stating why it is that this program is the best fit for you. And it's not just because, you know, Harvard or Yale are amazing institutions. It's because of the faculty that are there that would be providing the training for you. So let's say you want to apply in history of science at Harvard, let's just say. Who in the faculty are you hoping to work with? Who is doing research that you want to contribute to? And what about that program, aside from, you know, its legacy as an Ivy League, what about that program indicates to you that that's the program for you? And the more you have done your research and can demonstrate that you're prepared to commit to the PhD, that you're certain about, you know, at least like your research interests and what and why, the more compelling your essays are going to be. And those essays are a huge component of the application process. So once you've done that, then you can kind of start reaching out for letters of recommendation and things like that. I would say if you have no research experience, that is okay, as long as you can demonstrate that you do have the capacity um, to conduct research. And that just means, you know, like if through your letters of recommendation, if those letter writers can attest to your work ethic, what it's like to work with you, you know, and certain qualities about you that stand out, then you can demonstrate that you are prepared to conduct research. And like the truth is, that's why we get the PhD, so that we can learn through research. So it's okay if you don't have that experience directly, but you do have other experiences. I mean, you do have a bachelor's degree in computer science, and maybe you've applied that degree in some kind of industry and some kind of work. And maybe those skills can transfer to your PhD. And that's what's important, that's what's valuable. So as long as you can demonstrate that, I think that you'll be able to apply with a strong application. As far as being an international student, a lot goes into that. I definitely recommend reaching out to each program directly and asking them, you know, what the support is like for international students there, because it does differ by program and it does differ by institution. So, for example, Harvard might have some kind of support center, you know, even staff that support international students, a bunch of resources. And you want to know, you want to have a really good idea of what that's going to be like for you if you are admitted. And that goes into if and when. Funding, right? Like, what is funding like for international students? You know, room and board, all the things, are, it's just like, it's really important that you get that information so that you feel secure as a student there, and you know that you know, you're going to be able to stay for the duration of your program. I hope that's helpful. But you know, we have more of these webinars, and we'll be answering more questions during our Q&A. We might even do some webinars that are just strictly Q&A, because that seemed to you guys seemed to like that last week. So I hope that was helpful, but definitely it can be done, and we're here to support you to do that. Okay. If no other questions come in, I will be logging off. I'm sorry about the delay on our original broadcast, but hopefully this one was still useful for folks. And if you're watching the recording, I hope that this material can be utilized by you as you're seeking out letters of rec. Again, my name is V, and I'm an admissions expert here with Magoosh. I'm just going to add this one more time so you can check out our QR code to check out our website and see all of the other resources that we offer, especially if you're confused about where to start, if you're feeling overwhelmed. I know it's kind of like high season for applications right now, so it's perfectly fine if you're feeling like, I don't know where to begin, or am I doing this right? That's okay. Most people go through that. We do have a friendly student community on Discord, so you send out those questions to folks who are applying to similar programs as you, and kind of crowdsource resources and such. And then, of course, we have instructors for a whole bunch of things related to applying to graduate school and preparing for the exams. So if that's something you're in the middle of doing, go ahead and check us out. And again, my name was V, and I'll be seeing you all next week for our next webinar. I wish you all the best. Have a great rest of your day.